The Great Reset, the conspiracy that stopped being a theory. Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering your bank account has been optimized. Not hacked, not frozen. Optimized by a global authority you never voted for, using rules you never agreed to, for a crisis they declared but never defined. Your money is still there, technically, but now it has an expiration date. Spend it on approved purchases within 30 days or it vanishes. Buy that steak? Declined. Carbon footprint too high. Book that flight? Denied. You've exceeded your annual travel quota. Want to protest? Your social credit score just dropped 50 points. Good luck getting a loan, renting an apartment, or accessing public transport. This sounds like dystopian fiction, like a bad sci-fi movie where the villain is a soulless AI and the hero is a hacker in a leather jacket. Except this isn't fiction, and the people building this system aren't hiding. They're announcing it at conferences, in white papers, on magazine covers. In 2020, the World Economic Forum, the same organization that hosts billionaires and world leaders in Davos every year, published a video with 8 words that broke the internet. You'll own nothing, and you'll be happy. They deleted the video after backlash, but the plan didn't change. It went underground. And now, in 2025, pieces of that plan are already live. Central bank digital currencies rolling out in over 130 countries. Carbon credit systems linking your purchases to your environmental impact. 15-minute cities restricting where you can drive. AI surveillance tracking not just your location, but your intentions. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is a conspiracy in progress. And the scariest part? Most people still think it's about climate change or inequality or helping the poor. It's not. It's about control. Total, frictionless, irreversible control. Welcome to the Great Reset, the plan that was never voted on, the future that's being built while you scroll. And the question nobody in power will answer: why now? And why so fast? 1. The prophecy, when they told us exactly what they were going to do. Let's start with something most people missed. In June 2020, at the height of pandemic lockdowns, Klaus Schwab, founder of the World Economic Forum, released a book titled COVID-19, The Great Reset. Not a leaked document, not a conspiracy blog, a published book, with an ISBN sold on Amazon. The thesis was simple. The pandemic had exposed the fragility of global systems, and now was the time for a reset, not a recovery, a reset, a complete restructuring of capitalism, governance, and society. Schwab wrote, "The pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world." Notice the language, not recover, not rebuild. Reset, like a computer. Erase the old operating system, install a new one. And who gets to write the code? Not you, not elected governments. A coalition of unelected technocrats, NGOs, central banks, and corporations. Why did they announce this so openly? Here's the first question. Why would they telegraph the plan? If this is really a global conspiracy to seize control, why publish books and make videos about it? The answer is both simple and chilling, because they don't think you can stop it. This is the same reason villains in movies explain their plans. Not because they're stupid, because they've already won, and they want you to know it. The World Economic Forum isn't a shadow organization. It's a networking club for the 0.001%. Fortune 500 CEOs, heads of state, central bankers, tech billionaires. When Schwab talks about resetting the world, he's not speaking to you. He's coordinating with people who actually have the power to do it, and they've been planning this for decades. Therefore, the pandemic was the perfect excuse. Let's connect the dots. In 2019, the World Economic Forum ran a simulation called Event 201. It was a tabletop exercise imagining a global coronavirus pandemic. Participants included representatives from the CDC, the World Bank, Johnson & Johnson, and Chinese health officials. The exercise concluded that a pandemic would require centralized global health governance, suppression of misinformation, that is censorship, public-private partnerships to manage the crisis, digital tracking of populations. 3 months later, COVID-19 emerged, and every single recommendation from Event 201 was implemented. Coincidence? Maybe. But here's the problem. They're not even pretending it's a coincidence. Klaus Schwab himself said, "The pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity. Not a tragedy, an opportunity." Think about that. While millions were dying, while small businesses were collapsing, while people were forbidden from seeing dying relatives, global elites were celebrating because finally, they had the crisis they needed to justify the changes they'd wanted all along. 2. The blueprint, what the Great Reset actually wants. Okay, so they announced a reset, but what does that actually mean? Let's break it down. Not the PR version, the real version. Pillar 1, you'll own nothing. This phrase came from a 2016 World Economic Forum article titled, "Welcome to 2030. I own nothing, have no privacy, and life has never been better." The article described a world where you don't own your home, you rent from a corporation. You don't own your car, you subscribe to mobility services. You don't own your clothes, you rent them. You don't even own your data, it's harvested and monetized by platforms. The argument? Ownership creates inequality. Sharing creates sustainability. Why is ownership being eliminated? Because ownership equals independence. If you own your home, you can say no to your landlord. If you own your car, you can drive wherever you want. If you own physical cash, you can spend it however you want. But if everything is a subscription, a license, a temporary access pass, then every part of your life can be controlled, monitored, and revoked. Therefore, the subscription economy is conditioning. Look around. Everything is becoming a subscription. Netflix, Spotify, Adobe, Microsoft Office, even BMW tried to make heated seats a subscription. They backed down after backlash, but the idea is out there. You don't buy software anymore, you license it. And the license can be revoked if you violate terms of service. Terms written by corporations, changeable at will, enforced by algorithms. This isn't about convenience. This is about dependency. Pillar 2, Central Bank Digital Currencies, CBDCs. Here's where it gets concrete. Physical cash is dying, not by accident, by design. Over 130 countries are developing central bank digital currencies. Digital money issued directly by governments, not by commercial banks. China already has the digital yuan. Europe is testing the digital euro. The U.S. Federal Reserve is researching a digital dollar. Sounds convenient, right? Instant transactions, no more ATMs, no more lost wallets. But here's what they don't advertise. CBDCs are programmable money. Unlike physical cash, which is anonymous and uncontrollable once you have it, digital currency can expire if not spent within a certain time frame to stimulate the economy, be restricted to certain purchases, no alcohol, no guns, no unapproved merchants, be frozen or confiscated remotely without a court order, track every transaction you make forever with no privacy. Why are governments racing to implement this? Because cash is freedom. Digital currency is a leash. During the Canadian trucker protests in 2022, the Canadian government froze the bank accounts of protesters and anyone who donated to them. No trial, no warning, just financial excommunication. Imagine that power, but permanent and global. Therefore, cash bans are accelerating. Sweden is already nearly cashless. India banned high-denomination notes in 2016, forcing millions into digital systems. The European Central Bank is considering limits on cash transactions above 1,000 euros. The argument is always the same. Cash enables crime, but so do banks. The difference is banks can be monitored. Cash can't. Pillar 3. Carbon credit, social credit. Now let's talk about the environment. Not the real environment, the one being used as a justification for control. The Great Reset pushes hard on climate action, but not the kind where governments reduce emissions by changing industrial policy. The kind where you reduce emissions by changing your behavior. Enter personal carbon allowances. The idea is simple. Every person gets a carbon budget. Every purchase you make, food, gas, flights, electricity, is tracked and deducted from your allowance. Exceed your allowance? You pay penalties, or you're simply blocked from purchasing. This isn't theoretical. In 2023, MasterCard announced a carbon calculator feature for credit cards. Bank of America launched a carbon tracking tool. The infrastructure is already being built. Why are corporations doing this voluntarily? Because they see where this is going. Governments will eventually mandate carbon tracking. Companies that build the infrastructure early will win the contracts. And consumers? You'll have no choice. Therefore, climate policy becomes behavioral control. Bought too much meat this month? Declined. Your carbon footprint is too high. Want to drive to see your family for Christmas? Denied. You've used your annual travel quota. Think that's extreme? China's social credit system already does this, but for political behavior. The Great Reset just adds environmental behavior to the list. 3. The architects. Who's actually behind this? Okay, so there's a plan, but who's executing it? Let's name names. The World Economic Forum, the coordinators. The WEF isn't a government. It has no legal authority, but it has something more powerful: access. Every year, 3,000 of the world's most powerful people gather in Davos, Switzerland. Billionaires, presidents, CEOs, central bankers. They don't just talk, they coordinate. The WEF runs a program called Young Global Leaders. It's a training program for future world leaders. Graduates include Emmanuel Macron, President of France; Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada; Jacinda Ardern, former Prime Minister of New Zealand; Mark Zuckerberg, Meta; Gavin Newsom, Governor of California. Klaus Schwab bragged in 2017, "We penetrate the cabinets. I know that half of Canada's cabinet are young global leaders." Not elected, penetrated. Why does this matter? Because when leaders across multiple countries push the same policies, carbon taxes, digital IDs, vaccine passports, CBDCs, it's not a coincidence, it's coordination. Therefore, this isn't democracy, it's Davos-ocracy. You didn't vote for Klaus Schwab, but the people you voted for report to him. The big three asset managers, the muscle. Now let's talk money. 3 companies control more wealth in most countries. BlackRock, $10 trillion in assets. Vanguard, $8 trillion. State Street, $4 trillion. Together, they are the largest shareholders in almost every major corporation on Earth. Apple, Microsoft, ExxonMobil, Pfizer, Disney, they own it all, and they vote the shares. When BlackRock's CEO, Larry Fink, sends his annual letter to CEOs demanding climate action and stakeholder capitalism, it's not a suggestion, it's an order. Comply or lose investment. Why do these firms push ESG, environmental, social, governance, standards so hard? Because ESG is a Trojan horse. It sounds nice, environment, society, governance, but in practice it means companies must meet arbitrary social goals set by unelected boards. Governments must adopt policies that align with investor priorities. Dissent is punished financially. That's not capitalism, that's corporatism. Therefore, you don't own the companies, BlackRock does, and BlackRock wants the reset. The United Nations and WHO, the enforcement. Finally, there's the global governance layer. The United Nations has been pushing Agenda 2030, a set of sustainable development goals that sound noble but require massive centralization of power. The World Health Organization, during COVID, tried to gain authority to declare pandemics and override national sovereignty. They failed, barely, but they're trying again. In 2024, the WHO is negotiating a pandemic treaty that would give it power to declare global health emergencies, mandate vaccines and lockdowns, override national governments. Why are they pushing this now? Because COVID proved that people will surrender freedom for safety. And once you surrender it, you don't get it back. Therefore, global crises require global government, and global government requires crises. If there's no crisis, they'll create one, or declare one, or redefine one. 4. The rollout, how it's happening right now. Let's get specific. This isn't some future dystopia. Pieces are already live. Digital IDs, the gateway drug. India has Aadhaar, a biometric ID system covering 1.3 billion people. Europe is rolling out digital identity wallets. The UN is pushing for digital identity for all by 2030. Sounds harmless. Just a digital version of your driver's license, right? Wrong. A digital ID links everything: your bank account, your medical records, your travel history, your social media, your carbon footprint, your political affiliations. Once that's centralized, whoever controls the database controls you. Why are governments pushing this so hard? Because anonymous citizens are hard to control. Identified, tracked, categorized citizens are easy. Therefore, digital ID is the foundation. Everything else builds on it. No digital ID, no bank account, no healthcare, no travel, no life. 15-minute cities, the open-air prison. The concept: redesign cities so everything you need, work, shopping, healthcare, is within 15 minutes by foot or bike. Sounds nice: walkable neighborhoods, less pollution. But here's the catch. To enforce this, cities are installing low-traffic neighborhoods, LTNs, with cameras and fines if you drive outside your zone. Congestion charges that price out non-wealthy drivers. Digital permits required to leave your neighborhood. Oxford, UK is already testing this. Paris, Barcelona. Why would cities restrict movement? Officially, climate change. Actually, control. If you can't travel freely, you can't organize, you can't protest, you can't flee. Therefore, 15-minute cities are 15-minute cages. 5. The resistance, why this might fail. But here's the thing, they're rushing. And when you rush, you make mistakes. The backlash is real. Farmers across Europe are protesting climate regulations that would destroy their livelihoods. The Netherlands saw massive farmer uprisings in 2022 to 2023. Truckers in Canada shut down cities. Sri Lanka's government collapsed after trying to implement ESG farming policies. People are waking up, slowly, but they're waking up. Why is the resistance growing? Because the policies aren't abstract anymore, they're real, and they hurt. Therefore, the Great Reset only works if people comply, and compliance is breaking. 6. The end game, 3 futures. Scenario 1. They win, CBDCs become mandatory, cash is banned, digital IDs are required for everything, carbon credits ration your life, dissent is algorithmically suppressed, you'll own nothing, and you won't be happy, but you won't have a choice. Scenario 2. Stalemate. Some countries adopt, others refuse. The world fractures into technocratic zones and free zones. A new Cold War, but economic. Scenario 3. We win. Enough people say no. Enough governments refuse. The plan collapses under its own authoritarianism. Freedom wins, not because it was easy, but because people fought. Final thoughts. The reset that resets you. So that's the story. The Great Reset isn't coming. It's here. And the question isn't whether it's real. The question is whether you'll resist. Why are they doing this? Because they can. And therefore, will you let them? That's up to you.